Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Coast. My name is Rafe Beck, and I have the distinct honor of serving as the Executive Director of the University of Oregon Alumni Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome people from both coasts and in between. We have so many great people from so many different places joining us tonight. I want to especially thank our four sponsoring chapters, all on the East Coast, so the DC Ducks, the Philly Ducks, the New York Ducks, and the New England Ducks have all joined forces to create this wonderful event, and we're so thankful to all of you. You know, we have almost 30 chapters around the world, which is one way that the Alumni Association is able to help keep Ducks engaged all around the world. And we do our best to support these chapters, but I have to say, it is the volunteers who run each individual chapter who really serve as the face of the University of Oregon to their local communities. And we are so grateful for that. We have a number of our volunteer leaders participating today, and I'll introduce one of them in just a moment. But first, just want to note this, this is really the first of its kind event. We really wanted to showcase a variety of alumni doing interesting things across the East Coast. And so we have a variety of industries represented from journalism to education and the arts, and we'll get a taste of all those things today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to our wonderful DC Ducks president, Josh Savvy. Josh, take it away.
Great, thank you, Rafe. First of all, let me just say welcome and thank you for attending tonight's event. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording the event, and we'll post online later for those that couldn't attend. As Rafe said, this is an event that's done in collaboration between the DC Ducks, the New York Ducks, Philly Ducks, and New England Ducks. And I just want to personally thank the New York Ducks who put forward the idea of doing a collaborative event. It's been really exciting to plan, and we're looking forward to tonight's event. So tonight's event, just to give you a sense of kind of what we were thinking, is really the idea is about fostering relationships among Ducks. I think as chapters, we all do a really great job within our regions, cities of doing that. But given that we find ourselves in a very virtual setting, we thought, why not create relationships among the various chapters? In hopefully a post-COVID world, we'll be traveling again. And I know a number of us travel to various East Coast cities. So, there's friendly faces in those cities, and hopefully you'll be able to attend another chapters event in the future and be part of this broader alumni network. Just before we begin our panel, we all wanted to take an opportunity to tell you what each chapter has been up to. So over the past year, the DC Ducks have hosted a number of virtual events with U of O staff and alumni, and we're planning a couple events in the future, so stay tuned for that. When it is possible to return to in-person events, we hope to again host watch parties, networking events, along with our end of the year holiday party, which is a lot of fun and supports our scholarship program. Just a couple words about the scholarship program is the DC Ducks, as a number of chapters do as well. We have a scholarship program where we support a student each year who comes to Washington, DC to do an internship generally over the summer. This year, we're pleased to support Carolyn Coral, who is in the landscape architecture program at the U of O and was actually able to come to DC even with the pandemic to do an internship with the National Council for Preservation. And she worked at the tidal basin around the Jefferson Memorial. So it's just really fantastic for us as a chapter to be able to continue to give back to the broader UO community and students and see what they can do in DC over a summer. So, if you're ever so inclined, there's an option to donate through the UOA's website. But regardless of that, if you know students that might be interested in an opportunity to come out to the East Coast, please let them know about our scholarship. It's something we're really proud of and like supporting students. So with that, that's kind of a broad overview of what the DC Ducks have been up to. I'd like to now just turn it over to Oliver from the New York Ducks to tell you a little bit about what they've been doing these days.
Appreciate it, Josh. Thanks so much. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to take a quick minute to give an overview of the New York Ducks. We're extremely active chapter. We have Ducks from Suffolk County and Nassau County, all the way out in Long Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, and of course within the 5 boroughs of New York City. We do a number of events that are non-athletic event related. We have volunteering events throughout the calendar year, certainly before COVID. There's a soup kitchen in particular that we've been connected with for over 10 years on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. And it's always fun to see when we put that event up, over 24 ducks. Usually within less than a week, the registration fills out, and that's something that we've been involved with for quite some time. Another event that we've had a lot of fun with volunteering as a New York Ducks is the New York City Marathon. So we'll station at a particular mile marker and hand out water, hand out towels and whatnot, and that's been something that we've enjoyed over the years. We, being in New York City, we tend to host different groups from campus. So an example being the University of Oregon Lundquist Business School when they visit with MBA students or with finance students or the investment club. We will host a happy hour, we'll host a networking event. And actually there are some University of Oregon graduates within New York City that will actually host students to their offices, with which we've had a lot of fun with and had a lot of success with. And of course, athletic watch parties. We have a sponsored bar restaurant where we watch each and every single football game, men's and women's basketball. 2 different events come to mind. The men's football game against Auburn, kicking off the 2019 year, we actually had to turn away Ducks because we filled up over 150 seats with cheering Ducks. And of the women's Final Four event a couple years ago, similar crowd, had to turn people away for over 150 Ducks packing that place, cheering on the Lady Ducks. And then finally, something that we hold very dear to us is similar to what Josh described in Washington, D.C., the New York Ducks Intern Scholarship. So if a current student at the University of Oregon pursuing their undergraduate degree wins an intern here in New York City, we have a scholarship where we provide assistance for that endeavor. And we have 8 different board members, and we actually have a board member who is in charge as our scholarship chair. So we're proud to be Ducks in New York City, whether it's running through Central Park or running across the Brooklyn Bridge and wearing your Oregon gear and getting the random Go Ducks or someone throwing up an O. So with that, I'm going to pass it down I-95 to Philadelphia and to Mike and the Philly Ducks.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're a fairly small group here in Philadelphia, maybe about 10 or 20 of us, and we usually just get together for men's, women's basketball games and football games at one of the local pubs here. We like to have a good time and cheer on our Ducks. We have some folks that are, just from Oregon that live here in the city, but they like to, join the few alumni here as well. So we just kind of get together for mostly games and whatnot. Most of the folks are from the city, so it's a pretty easy commute for everybody here. And we haven't been able to do any of the other items that some of the other clubs are offering right now, just because we are fairly small. So if there's any way to, let people know, just kind of get the word out, that Philly does have a group for the Oregon Ducks, just kind of let everybody know, and we'll go from there. And I'll like to pass it back to Josh, I believe.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I just want to put in a plug. We weren't able to have a rep join us from the New England Ducks, but they're very active as well and host a number of watch parties. Currently looking for some volunteers to get involved and assist with event planning that alumni up there would like. So if you're interested, please get in touch with the UAA. There will be an email that goes out later with some contact information. So if you're interested, you can get involved. But as you can see, all of the chapters on the I-95 corridor are quite active. So we hope to see you at events like this in the future. And with that, let's go ahead and get started with tonight's program. Oliver is our moderator for this evening, so I'm going to turn it back over to him.
Okay, appreciate it, Josh. I think we will now get to know our panelists, go through and do a quick introduction. Let's go ahead and start with Amanda. So Amanda Pflugrad is currently entering her 6th season as the team reporter, lead host, and also producer for the Boston Celtics. Jennifer Coffey is an education program specialist in the Office of Special Education Programs in the U.S. Department of Education. And certainly last but certainly not least, the Catos. Here in New York City, Preston Cato is the artistic director of the Queens World Film Festival, an experimental feature filmmaker, and he currently teaches at the New York Digital Film Academy. Great mass, looking good. And Kathy Cato is the executive director of the Queens World Film Festival. She moved to New York City in the 1980s with her theater company, 4-Play Improvised Theater, and she pioneered the Herald format, or the long form, into the New York improv comedy scene. All right, panelists, I think to get started, we'd like to get to know you a little bit better. So perhaps tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you studied at the University of Oregon, how you ended up on the East Coast, or Preston, how you ended up back on the East Coast. And I think we'll go ahead and start with Amanda.
Yeah, so first off, I just wanted to say I'm honored to be a part of this event, and thank you everyone who worked on this to put it together. But a background on myself, I moved around a lot growing up. My father coaches college football, so it was kind of wherever the job opportunity was for him at the time. So when people ask where I'm from, I have to list a few places. I was born in Missoula, Montana. I lived in Arizona, went to high school in Washington, and then I moved to Eugene for college. And like I said at the beginning, I still have a lot of family that's in Eugene, my grandmother and aunts and uncles. So I try to go back as much as I can. And at the University of Oregon, I majored in broadcast journalism with a minor in communication studies. And then in terms of how I ended up with the Celtics and here in New England, it's kind of similar to my childhood a little bit. I moved around a lot after graduation, kind of just going wherever the jobs were at or wherever I felt that I could get the most reps. So after graduation, I moved to Arizona to start an internship, and it was in the sports department at ABC 15, just networking as much as I could in the Arizona market. And then I got my start at Fox Sports Arizona. I was doing freelance work for them at the time. And my first assignment was actually covering the national championship game in 2011 between Oregon and Auburn. And that is a top career highlight for me still. I then moved to Chicago, where I was doing in-studio reporting for college football and college basketball. And then I ended up moving back to Arizona, and I was working for ESPN, SEC Network, and Pac-12 Network. So based in Arizona, flying all over the country, covering the Pac-12 schools. And then I was in the South a lot in Georgia and Florida too. And I did that for about 6 months. And then I took a job as the team reporter for the New York Jets, and that was just a season position. So once the season was over, the job didn't continue. And during that time, the Celtics had actually reached out and said that their team reporter had left. And so they had an opportunity open. I flew to Boston. I auditioned. I didn't hear from them for about 3 weeks, so I didn't know if I got the job or not. But they ended up contacting me and offered me the position. And I've been with the Celtics now for 6 seasons.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Lots of moving parts.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Jennifer, I think we'll pass it on to you.
Sure, great, thank you. I'm Jennifer Coffey, and I am a graduate of the Special Education Department, well, the College of Education Special Education Department. I received my doctorate there in 2006. Time now. Prior to that, I started off as a teacher in California. And I was a special education teacher. And then I went into the Peace Corps, and I was in a country called Lesotho in Southern Africa. Raise your hand if you've heard of Lesotho before. How many people have? It's 2 million people. It's very small, surrounded by South Africa completely. So it was actually a who wants to be a millionaire question. What country is completely surrounded by another country? Fun fact. And so from there, I came back and I was a social worker in California for people with disabilities for about a year. And then I went to University of Oregon to receive my doctorate, which I did. I worked at the Oregon Department of Education, and then now I am at the US Department of Education in the special ed office. So that was my journey.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. And let's pass it over to the Catos there in Queens.
Well, I won the pre-show toss, so I'm going first. And my name is Katha Cato, and I'm speaking for myself and also Preston. But we're thrilled to be here. This is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for not only having us, but just making this forum for so many people around the world. It's exciting. So I was born in Yuma, Arizona, and I moved further down into the desert in Southern California in the inland tip in the Imperial Valley, and was raised in a very agricultural background. And then I went to Cal Poly Pomona and got my undergraduate in theater there. And I went to go visit a family member who was living in Eugene, and I got there on a Friday, and I went to the country fair the next day, and I said, I definitely am moving here. And I came back and I worked at Lenny's Nosh Bar. I doubt if anybody on this panel knows, but it was that was a scene and a half. And then I became a teaching fellow at the University of Oregon in the theater department, and that was a life-changing, a life-shaping event. I met so many people there that when I follow them and I see what they're doing now, they're working in their passions, and it's all gone in different directions, and we were very well equipped to go out and do. So about 7 of us came together to New York. We had an improvisational theater company called Foreplay Improvised Theater, and we did great. And then I met Preston right before I left Oregon. Several years later, I went back to Seattle. You were working in Washington, and we did a project together. And we've been producing things ever since. We now run the Queens World Film Festival. We just are turning 11. We work with children of all ages, all grades, all nationalities here in Queens. It's really extraordinary. We have a 5th grade inclusion class that is the every year we've worked with them in a local neighborhood, and they're like the loves of my life. Incredible. Incredible. I want to send Jennifer some films that they've made. They're just amazing. And we just feel very fortunate. I feel very fortunate to have chosen a path that took me to an institution that said, what do you want to do? Okay, if you can articulate it, and if you can make it make sense to us, we're going to make sure that you're prepared to go out and do it. And that's what I have enjoyed for now over 30 years in New York.
Well, I'm Preston Cato. I also come from a rural background, Fredonia, New York, which is way up near Buffalo in the snow belt. I got a couple degrees from Michigan State in landscape architecture. And then I practiced in Boston, Cambridge, for 3 years. A lot of corporate clients, worked for IM Pay, etc. And it was an incredible experience, but it was time to get a master's degree. I looked around for several schools, and I found that University of Oregon had a couple things. They had filmmaking. Well, it wasn't called filmmaking because the art department didn't like the word film, so they called it motion graphics. And I'd been just in Boston working, studying at this school called the Orson Welles Film School, which was conveniently about 50 steps from my landscape architecture office. So I took that, decided to check into Oregon, and their mascot was a duck. And I thought, that's it. You know, it's not a viper, a Spartan, it's none of these giant, it was a duck. So I had a wonderful interview, and I got into the program Landscape Architecture, and like Katha said, they said, well, what do you want to do? So I told them, and they went, okay, great. Go ahead and do it, make films, whatever you need to do. I was a teaching fellow for several years in landscape architecture. Then I worked over into the master program in motion graphics, where I was also a teaching fellow. Then I started making films in the community. I made films for the city planning agency. I did a number of documentaries, environmental documentaries. I made political advertisements. I made a film about worms, unbelievably successful. And well, then I started to make a feature film. That's where I was heading, and that's when I met Katha. I was casting, and that was in 1984, and I finally got the financing of several $1 million, and that was 1986, and that's when the movie went into production. Then I followed it here, chasing the post-production, the money. We finally got it finished. It was a 2-time CBS Movie of the Week. And then since then, it's been, we've been produced her show. We've made movies, made a second feature, and about another 100 films. So that's where I am, and I'm the artistic director, and I get to choose films from all over the world, which is an incredible experience to realize that no matter where we are in the world, we all have the same wants, the same desires. We want our families, we want health, we want food, clean water, everything. It's so no matter where we are in the world, these films that come to us, it's an awakening experience to watch them and to be part of their filmmaking life.
Well, I appreciate it, Catherine, Preston, and Amanda and Jennifer. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and how you either ended up in Eugene, and then from Eugene, how you've parlayed that into your 3 respective industries. Similar to Mike in Philadelphia and Josh in DC. Here in New York, we come across, whether it's a football watch party or an event where perhaps we're hosting ducks from campus, and through discussions, it's always fascinating to hear people's journeys, how they, whether it's an undergraduate degree or postgrad degree from the University of Oregon, and how they've been able to use that. And we appreciate you sharing your stories. And I do have a couple follow-up questions, and we're going to stay in the context of what it's like to be a duck, and for each one of you in your respective industries. So we'll start with Preston and Katha. Being here in New York City, and particularly with being in the arts industry, what has it been like to be a University of Oregon graduate here in New York and within the arts community in the 5 boroughs?
Well, it's a pretty saturated market. It's New York. And the luxury of that is that you have the time and the space to refine your voice. Because when you're not making noise, many other people are, and you're not missed. And so you have the time to turn away. And the University of Oregon empowered me to have a vision and to be patient enough to amass the skills, and then those skills have always been with me, and we've always colored outside of the box. We've always gone our own way, and it's no longer frightening because we know what our vision is, and the university gave us the time, the space, the support. I was amazed. I had never had an experience like that when I went to Oregon. And not only the faculty and the buildings, the town, you could perform anywhere in that town. You could do anything. And everywhere you looked, there's other artists, and so many of them have come to New York. It's great.
Well, I have to say that the thing that always has kept me in awe of the University of Oregon is it's about ideas and exploration, and that it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, I was fortunate to be in the architecture and fine arts complex, and all of the interconnectedness of all of the different departments. And even though I was primarily in landscape architecture, my beloved professor Jerome Diethelm, he said, well, go where you need to go to. And then finding that available there, and I could make connections with the landscape, which in Oregon is everything. It's one of the most beautiful landscapes in the country. And then in the art departments, we have the professor who was all about ideas, and developing ideas. And he said, that's what we do here. When an idea gets to the point where you actually need to realize it, then those tools will show up. It's like magic. But until that point in time, you just need to think about it. And it was a place that caused a lot of thought in terms of questioning, developing, and finding a voice. And that's exactly what Casa says, finding your voice. And all I can say is an incredible experience. I was fortunate enough as I had Steve Prefontaine in 2 of my classes, and he was there to learn about motion graphics. He wanted to figure this all out, and he was a very inquisitive young man, as were others. So I just want to thank the university for its freedom to explore, to do new things that you just can't imagine happen anywhere else.
I just want to say my thesis project was called Process in Progress. And that is what our life has been. Mm-hmm. We're constantly in the process. It's happening. We're not waiting. We are in it. We're living it. And that was a new concept to me before I got there.
Well, thank you for sharing powerful words, Katha and Preston. Thank you so much. I think we'll pass it down to Washington, D.C. and Jennifer. So Jennifer, if you could perhaps tell us a little about being a University of Oregon graduate there in Washington, D.C., working for the U.S. Department of Education. What has that meant to you?
Good question. So one of the things I didn't get to talk about as much, and so I'll get here. First of all, I didn't get to say why I chose University of Oregon in the first place. And in the special education area, it's number 2 in the US. It's whoever makes the ratings, I think it's number 1. But it's a very well-respected school of special education. So that's why I chose it in the first place. So that's an important background to the fact that the people who are there, and I think this is probably true of all the U of O, although my experience is in one specific area, just the hardest workers you've ever met, completely determined to get the job done. And our area of special education, that means improving results for children with disabilities. And so very mission focused, definitely a vision about how to get there. And so that's really made a difference for me in any job I've taken since then. So first the Oregon Department of Education, now the US Department of Education. What I took from that is, policy and changing things on the ground in that way. Many people become professors, they go on to other universities. That's kind of the normal track. I kind of took a different track, and it was interesting to see people react to that, because what you do is you have doc students that you send out to these other great universities, and they spread the Oregon way. So I was spreading in a different direction, and it was tough for people to accept that at first, but I had a fantastic advisor, and he was supportive, and then people kind of went along, and they started to realize if we have someone in the policy area, that's actually kind of helpful. The things that we believe are going to make a change for children with disabilities, that it's a good thing to have that there. And so I've actually continued to have a strong connection with U of O because we have so many fantastic change makers in that area. And the work ethic, it continues no matter what's going on around you. You know who you are, you know what you want to get done, and you're going to have to work hard to get it done. Doesn't mean you don't have to play. Have a really what great beer tastes like, what it is to go have some fun. Other places have great beer now too, but it used to be, kind of just Oregon and Washington. So that's really, I think the work ethic and the vision and just the determination to get there, wherever you're trying to get, has made a difference everywhere I've been.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, Amanda, up there in Boston. Your experience being a University of Oregon graduate in Boston and perhaps other stops in Arizona, or your brief tenure in New York, what has that meant to you? What has that been like being a University of Oregon graduate in your industry and at your various stops in the last 6 years in New England?
Yeah, I first off, I agree 100% with what Preston and Katha had said of, I felt that at the University of Oregon, that I really found my voice and I found who I was. I met the best people that I've ever met in my life, made the most true relationships and wonderful friendships. And I feel like that really set me up, moving and being able to adjust and knowing who I was, that hard work, that passion that U of O instilled into me. But when I first got to New England, it definitely was an adjustment. I think one of the biggest things was college sports and college football. It's people pay attention to it here, but it's more about the professional sports teams. And at the time, Tom Brady with the Patriots, but I guess I could argue that it's still Tom Brady right now in his Super Bowl win. But, I'd always watched the Pac-12 network and just talk about the West Coast. And a lot of people that I met were born and raised here. So it was kind of unique to find someone from the West Coast. With that said, though, I've always felt that you attract people who went to the U of O or have a connection to Oregon in some way. And when that happens, it is really special because you think to yourself, they know what it's like there. They know, and they know how special it is. And one thing that's been really unique and has come full circle for me is Danny Ainge actually went to North Eugene High School and is from Oregon. And now Peyton Pritchard is here playing for the Celtics, which Danny has even said that he paid close attention to his career and followed him because of that Oregon connection and being from the West Coast. And so I was actually able to do a segment not too long ago with Peyton, just highlighting the U of O and his college experience and what makes it so special. And it was such a fun interview, and getting an opportunity to talk to another Duck was just so special because they get it, and you can really connect on that.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We've Oregon Ducks around the country have certainly enjoyed watching Peyton and his success that he's had. He's played so well.
Yeah, I'm glad he's back from the injury. That was really hard to see. I almost started crying, but it wasn't as severe as what a lot of people thought. So that was the good news out of it.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. Katha and Preston and Jennifer and Amanda, thank you for sharing those thoughts. I think we're gonna shift gears a little bit, and I do have a couple questions that around the pandemic, and Jennifer, we'll start with you. But before I ask Jennifer a specific question about your industry and around the pandemic, we've all seen the coverage of the pandemic and the challenges to healthcare providers, the airline industry, the hospitality industry, certainly the restaurant industry, those who have shifted working from home, who are able to, the global pandemic really has affected all industries. And Jennifer, I'll start with you. So when schools went remote last year, educators, school districts scrambled around the country to quickly adapt. And certainly special education teachers in particular have faced very unique challenges with serving their students remotely. So a couple of questions for you. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in your role at the U.S. Department of Education? And how do you see special education changing or adapting post-pandemic?
Yeah, great. So in a great part of the US and a challenging part of the US when it comes to federal government is states, right? So every state makes their own decisions. And in education, often every district makes its own decisions. And sometimes you have a district where every school makes its own decisions, right? And so in a national/global pandemic, that makes things especially challenging in terms of providing guidance, providing support, et cetera, et cetera. So from the federal perspective, it's tougher for that. You're asking about what's happened with my job. I support specifically state educational agencies. So like Oregon Department of Education, they provide professional development, these grants to teachers and other personnel who work with children with disabilities. So you've got people who are working from home often. They are working all day long. It's become like a 24-hour job. They don't have time for the training, for the coaching, for the other things that they used to get. And so improving personnel practices, improving teacher practices has gotten very hard. When that will go back to, it depends. Again, it's state to state. Silver lining a bit, I think there may be a deeper realization of how important families are, because they've had to step in and be the de facto teacher, right? They've had to support behavior. We're talking about children with disabilities and other children too. They've had to support the behavior. So how do we reach the families? How do we support them? And that's always been the case in early childhood, but hopefully it will stick after this too for the older grades, that how important that relationship is with families and supporting families. The other thing that I think could be a silver lining is telehealth, right? So in the special ed area, that could be speech therapy that you're doing over a Zoom. One of the problems that we have in normal times is that we don't have enough of these providers. And so if you can start to have people come in via the internet, potentially you're going to reach more kids who need it. But there've been really strict rules about that before. So whether the regulations will remain waived or will change after this will remain to be seen. But those are two silver linings, one major difficulty from this.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
A colleague of mine, I work in finance here in Manhattan. There's a colleague of mine who, him and his wife have a special needs child, and we have frequent conversations. I have such a tremendous amount of respect, and I think I've gained an even deeper amount of appreciation for the care that goes into raising that child. And add in, both of them are working professionals, and to your point, there's no divide now. You go right from your kitchen table to your living room. But the silver linings that you have mentioned, I think that's great, and appreciate sharing.
Thank you.
Amanda, so you were in a pretty unique situation when I would suspect this was probably back in March. So you were in Milwaukee. So the Boston Celtics are playing at the Milwaukee Bucks. You're in Milwaukee. The NBA announces the season suspended because of the pandemic. So a couple questions for you. A, what was that experience like being there on the ground in Milwaukee as that news broke? What are some of the challenges that you face, not just as a sports reporter, but as a producer, as a host? And do you think there'll be long-lasting ramifications for your industry post-pandemic?
Yeah, the Celtics were getting set to play the Bucks the next day, and I just remember it was such a crazy time. I was in my hotel room and turned on the game and saw the news that it was postponed, and I knew in that moment that Rudy Gobert had COVID. I knew it because there was no other explanation other than a player had to have tested positive for them to stop a game like that. And in that next moment, it was, well, where do we go from here? Do I have COVID possibly? Does the team have COVID? The Celtics had just played the Jazz the week before, so it was going through kind of the contact tracing. So I was texting with my coworkers on, what we were going to do. We were instructed to stay in our hotel rooms by the Celtics team doctors, and we're told that we needed to come down early in the morning to be briefed on the next steps for that and what the next steps would be. There was a lot of panic. There was a lot of worry of, are we going to be in Milwaukee for 2 weeks to quarantine? Will we be able to fly back to Boston? And so that next morning we met with the doctors and the whole team was down there. Brad Stevens was down there. And I remember we were all meeting and just this moment of this is the reality right now. This is really happening. And the doctors asked how we felt, if we were experiencing a fever at all. And luckily no one in our travel party had any symptoms. So we were able to fly back to Boston, but we were told to stay away from family and friends and quarantine. And we did that, I would say, probably 4 days. And then they started to have players in to find out the results for the test results. And that's when it was revealed that Marcus Smart was the only one who had tested positive. It was definitely a crazy time. And I remember it so vividly and how everything did unfold. with the challenges in my job, I first off want to say, I know that there's challenges in every profession, but I think the challenges happening in sports right now are minuscule compared to other professions. You look at the healthcare field and people are putting their lives on the line every day. And I just have so much respect for that and, trying to keep everyone safe. But for my job as a sports reporter, it's changed completely since the night in Milwaukee. I've seen one Celtics player, one NBA player since COVID, and that was Taco Fall. We were able to do a feature on him at the zoo with his family, but that's been it. For myself, I used to travel with the team. I'd be everywhere where the team was, events, practices, shoot-arounds, and now everything, I'm all remote. I'm working from home in my apartment in Boston, and we're not going into TD Garden right now. It's a very select group of people that are even able to go in, that are even able to be in the red zone, which is technically the closest to the players. The players and coaches are doing testing twice, sometimes 3 times a day. And so when all that happened, our department really had to get creative. And so everything is shift now that I was doing on game days. I'm now doing it over Zoom. And besides some of the technical issues at first with working out Zoom, another challenge I think is just the human element of it all that gets taken away. Used to being at shoot around or a game or even on the team plane, you get to talk to the players off camera, see how they're doing, see how their families are doing. And now with Zoom, you really have limited time to get a player. People are all trying to get their questions in, and there's no small talk anymore, and you're not finding those stories that you probably naturally would have been able to on the road. And I would say the last challenge is just not being at the games. You can't really see everything that's going on clearly, what the Celtics bench is doing, or if a player gets hurt, if he's taken to the locker room. When you're watching it on television, they usually go to a TV timeout. But if I was at the game, I'd get to see that real-time reaction of, okay, even with Peyton Pritchard, I didn't know what happened because they did a TV timeout, but some of the media that they did allow in were saying, oh, he's getting taken away to the locker room. They were reporting it in that actual moment. And now it's kind of switching it to watching it from a fan's perspective and not as much of a insider or team reporter anymore. But with in terms of the lasting changes, I do think that there's going to be lasting changes in the media world with this all happening. I think there's a huge cutback, and we're already seeing it with teams and other networks not traveling their reporters anymore, not only to save money, but I think limit exposure to the virus and keep everyone healthy and only travel the people that are absolutely necessary for the Celtics. And I think another change is going to be Zoom interviews. Those are going to become more of the standard, especially if media aren't traveling right now. PR is going to have to make players available somehow on the road. And I think that that's just the easiest solution. They've proven that it works. And I could see that really continuing on with these changes and making that the norm now.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That must have been an experience when you're in Milwaukee that you look back 10 years from now. I mean, you really were in the sports world, you were in the thick of it. And I certainly appreciate your comment about, other industries that, you mentioned healthcare and perhaps a nurse who's in a hospital. I will say, as a sports fan myself, speak for many here, sports throughout these last 11 months, this last year, has been such a nice distraction. And your industry and your role, the Boston Celtics, I say this from New York as a Knicks fan, so hopefully I don't get a rock thrown at the window here, have been such a great distraction from so many other stresses that are pulling us, either with family members affected by the virus or work stress or family stress or whatnot. So your industry does play a really critical role, and I appreciate your comments. I think we'll move to the Catos and Kath and Preston. So Amanda, thank you for that.
Yep.
So Kath and Preston, a couple questions about your industry and the pandemic. So you changed the Queen's World Film Festival to a virtual event last year, and that was after New York City announced that all cultural organizations would be truly, unfortunately, closed on an interim basis. So a couple questions for you. So what were some of the challenges that you faced, and what was the response to moving fully online? How do you see your organization changing post-pandemic? And then finally, how do you see the overall film industry adapting post-pandemic?
Well, first of all, Amanda, that should be a name of a movie. The Night. I remember The Night in Milwaukee. That's a film waiting to be made. What's interesting about your panel is that all four of us, are working in the world of bringing groups together and working for common goals.
Mm-hmm.
And also, while the individual within that effort flourishes and finds their place to fit and gets their moment. And it's really extraordinary, and that is what moves us forward as a species, is wanting to work together on something that we find enjoyable, the doing of, as well as the watching of, as well as the reflecting of. So I think that's an interesting thing that's come out of the panel. So March 7th, I believe we were having a party. We were having our famous trailer party where we were screening all of our trailers, and I was making jokes, and I told them that I had just ordered wipes and gloves and all that stuff, and I'd spoken to our venues, and we were prepared to go to 75% capacity, 50% capacity, but everything was going to be fine. March 13th, we were told we would go to half capacity, so I found a couple of other little places in the neighborhood that we could do spillover, and we let all the artists around the world in 32 nations know this is what's going to happen. I know I told you you're going to be in this theater, but you might be in this theater. It's all going to be okay. The 16th, we were told you're closed. That's it. We opened on March 19th at 7:30, online, on time, 191 films, 32 nations. And I'm here to tell you, it almost killed us. It was so hard because there wasn't a lot of that happening. Now, these wonderful festivals online have the bells and whistles. You go to the drive-in, your car's on the red carpet, you have a pre-recorded Q&A, somebody delivers wine, you have a sommelier who says the wine pairing. We were here. We had a couple of interns who could help us reformat everything. Everything had already been on drives, ready to go to these big, gorgeous venues, but now they were going to be reformatted to be seen like this, perhaps, or like this, perhaps, and Preston, it came down to just him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was busy getting a hold of all the filmmakers, because even though in our contracts on Film Freeway, it says that they trust us and we're going to do what we're going to do. I didn't want to do that kind of a change without letting people know in the world. And so I spoke on WhatsApp for the first time quite a bit to India, to Iran, to Ireland, to China. And there were some filmmakers who felt uncomfortable with it going online because they just didn't know if it's going to be 2 weeks and then the world's seen their film, they may not get a distribution deal. So we accommodated everybody. You reformatted everything.
Yeah, certainly did.
And that was just insanity. And we went with an organization. They were great. They were wonderful. Discover.tv. But they had never done anything like this. And we're a lot.
And they were a lot, too. It was
we're a lot.
That was a beta platform that we were on, that we chose to go on.
And it was the Wild West. So we got over 30,000 views. And it was extraordinary. I have so many emails from people all over the world thanking Queens for continuing to go forward. And people saw more films, of course, than they ever would. And people were able to connect with each other. And Italy, the filmmakers from Italy were very, very nervous for all of us and kept emailing every day, "Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay?" Because at that time it was very bad.
And where he was from was right in the middle of it, in Italy.
And he was going to premiere this incredible film at MoMI. And he had been recently named one of the 10 best diversity inclusive young directors in the world.
In the last 10 years.
And he had saved this incredible film because he knew that Queens would love it. And it didn't happen. It just was heartbreaking.
And we had found him a home. He and 8 of his family members could stay for free and be here as part of the premiere, the world premiere.
And a lot of the filmmakers from all over the world had that investment. So then on the 29th, when we closed, we realized there was a pandemic on,
Yeah.
which we had largely missed. And that was terrifying to me. Some people are a little older than other people. And I'm only 3 years out of a very icky cancer situation, but I'm doing great. So we didn't know what to do.
All of our after-school programs were canceled, everything.
So there were some children who were reaching out to us. So we started a Thursday night Zoom meeting with kids. They made a film. I'll share it with everybody. They were just amazing. And then slowly but slowly, the artistic community started revving up. So then on May 6th, we started a series of shows called Wednesday Nights at 9, live Zoom, and which I had to learn a whole bunch of stuff for that too. And it was craziness. But we selected community-based organizations who were doing some sort of humanitarian work in the neighborhood, curated a group of films around them, and then we all gathered on Wednesday nights on Zoom to talk about the films and talk about the organization.
Meet the filmmaker, and we would then allow the organizations. It wasn't a pledge thing. It was like, here's some links. This is what you can do. This is what they find out what they need, and to spotlight these people. It was, and of course, I believe our very first one. I think one of the early ones was at East Elmhurst Hospital, which was the center.
So it was really an extraordinary position to be in. 91 filmmakers from around the world participated in that. We did 19 shows, over 19,000 views. I keep talking about the views because it's insane to me that people from Serbia are experiencing this work as the same time as a 5th grader from Corona, at the same time as a graduate student in Oregon, as they say in New York.
Right.
It's a unique experience, and we're getting ready. We're going to be going with the 11th in June. It's the Wild West. We can do anything we want. We're going to do inside, outside, upside, and stuff they haven't even invented yet. And we're going to bring the world together again.
The only thing I really miss is we have a thing called a potluck, which is 2 months in advance, and I don't know if any other film festival does it, but it started in somebody's living room, and then now it's in a big hall. It's all about bring your food, and everybody gets to know each other. So we create this community 2 months before the festival starts, so you already begin to know people, and that kind of then snowballs out. So that's one way, and we get to talk about food, not just my movie, which is really wonderful.
It's a relief. It's a relief. Yeah. But the future of the business.
Well, the film festival business, I mean, this year, Sundance, for example, went virtual. And many people, what I've read professionally, is that they've had some of the best experiences they've ever had because they got to see more and more of the films, because it wasn't just trudging through the snow and go to the bar and then you go to this meeting. And a couple of the panels, they said, were just sensational. Best panels they've ever had, and they were virtual. And I think they had like 2.4 million views. And so, I mean, that's just not possible no matter where you are. And so I think the virtual world is here to stay for a while. It is something that works. And in terms of film festivals, I mean, going forward, it's going to be those that can afford to put up a drive-in, which is very expensive. Other screens, I mean, even though we may be at 50%, let's say towards the summer, I think the population in general is going to be a little hesitant to get into a packed room. I mean, that is what it's all about, is the shared experience, the big screen. But Netflix has proven that you can do some amazing work, and they already had a platform. And as much as it is, I mean, these platforms are a way of the future, and the industry fought it a little bit because they're saying, well, because you're on a platform, you can't really be a movie, etc., and so on. But Netflix has got a ton of Oscars this year. Amazon does, and because they're just really good films, regardless of the platforms. Theaters are struggling because they demand, they are, and thank God that the new relief package includes theaters, and not just motion pictures, but live theater performance. The arts all over the world bring in a lot of dollars. A lot of people come to the arts everywhere. They're very important, as you said, Oliver. The sports is an incredible break in what's going on, and so are, hopefully live performances will be back. Now, going forward, the motion picture industry is very much like what Amanda said about testing. They are tested. I've got several friends who work in the business, and they're tested 4 times a day, just like the athletes are. They are constantly, and the rules and regulations are stringent. If somebody, and productions have been shut down all over the place. There are some places now that are flourishing. I mean, Iceland has got a great program. If you've got a movie to shoot, go to Iceland. And so there are places, but it's very strict and very stringent, as it should be. It should be. And so there are people monitoring everything all the time. So where it's going from here is that online is going to be a big deal. Disney online, oh my God, they exploded.
We want to be together, and
Yeah.
we will be together. And we are not failing our children. We are not failing each other.
No.
We are surviving a pandemic and finding new ways to connect. And it's not going to be this way forever. And I applaud what everybody has done to find a way
Yeah.
to come together. This is amazing for us. This is great to be here with all of you.
Oh, it's incredible. It's amazing.
Well, Catherine, Preston, truth be told, for those participating in our event tonight, we sit literally across the river from each other here in our great city of New York. But prior to this event, I did not know you, either of you. And something that really strikes me about the two of you is your infectious attitude of "we will overcome." And I know the arts industry has been affected from Eugene to Portland to Boston to DC, but certainly here in New York City, it means so much to the city of New York. It is part of the fabric of this city. And the two of you have, I hate to repeat myself, have an infectious can-do and we will overcome attitude. So thank you. Thank you for your words and remarks. As the president of the New York Ducks, I look forward to marketing the heck out of the Queens World Film Festival. I do ask invitation to the potluck. Maybe sneak me in the back.
Do you? I'm
do
fairly pushy. You may
You
have
do that
noticed.
cave piece?
Can I share with you what we say before the screenings?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. It's been a while since I've had a chance to say this. From the beginning of time, we have gathered in the darkened caves around the flickering lights to share our stories.
Mm-hmm.
We've upgraded the caves. The flickering lights are now zeros and ones. But the desire and the need to connect and to share our stories prevails.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, both of you. So with that, we're going to shift into some little lighter topics, but Jennifer and Amanda and Preston and Kate, thank you so much for your words about your respective industries, and again, just thank you. So we're going to shift. I know we're at 8 o'clock, top of the hour here in the East Coast, 5 o'clock there back west. Do have another question for all 4 of you, and then we're going to actually turn some time over to the audience. So just a quick housekeeping reminder, please submit your questions through the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we'll be happy to answer those. So let's go ahead and ask one more question. And Amanda, I think we'll start with you, then we'll go to Jennifer, then we'll go back to Kath and Preston. Let's start with Amanda. So Amanda, what would you find working in your industry? What would you find is the most rewarding thing of being a producer, being a host, working in the sports industry?
That's there's a lot. There's a lot that I'm really thankful for, and there are days where I get home and I think, this is my job. This is something that I've wanted to do, and majored in broadcasting. I was always gravitating more towards the sports side just because of my dad, and played sports growing up. So there's a lot, but I think the one, when at the end of the day, it's the relationships that you get to build, and just creating that trust with either a player or a coach, and getting to know a player or coach's family on the team playing, or just building that connection too, has always been super special to me. And I think a lot of the times you can kind of get caught up in looking at an athlete by their accomplishments or stats, but it's really important to remember that they're people too. They have their families, they have their loved ones, and getting to see that has always stood out to me. And another rewarding part, I think, is just feeling part of a family. I've been with the Celtics now for 6 seasons, and before COVID hit, I was traveling with them all the time. And I would always make the joke that I would see the Celtics players and coaches more than my own family because, you're spending holidays on the road, Christmas Day games and Thanksgiving, and, you're with them 24/7. And so to feel a part of that family has always been super special. And I really think that the relationships and taking that away is the most rewarding part of it all for me.
Okay. Thank you. Jennifer, we'll go down to Washington, D.C. What would you find is the most rewarding thing about working in your industry there in D.C. and working for the U.S. Department of Education?
Yeah. So I spoke about my advisor at U of O, who I love very much still, Rob Horner. And when I said I was interested in working for the federal government, he said something along the lines of, you have to be tenacious. You're going to have to be persistent, tenacious. It's not for everybody, but, luckily it's turned out to be for me. It does, the pace of change is slower, and it's meant to be that way. And if things were happening too quickly at the federal level, probably wouldn't always be a good thing. But I've seen a lot of good things happen. And to Amanda's point, a lot of the times it's built on relationship, just like everything else. And so I work with people all across the US, and that's a great part about being at the federal level. I get to talk, and I work with people in Oklahoma and in South Dakota and in Louisiana. And, so I get to know what's going on in the ground in all those places and build those relationships, and also hear their successes in their various states, and how they're, again, improving results for children with disabilities. So it's worth it, but it is a little Sisyphean at times, so pushing them back up the hill.
All right, well, thank you.
Mm.
The Catos, Preston and Katha. There in your industry, what would you find is the most rewarding thing?
It happens easily once a year. Some nervous parent will come up to me in the lobby and say, is my kid's filming? Is it any good? And I say, look around. They are doing it, and he or she didn't choose art. We have no choice. We are artists. And then they go in, they see the film, and they maybe still don't understand it. And then they see their child, who's now 25, 35, up answering questions with a plate of knowledge. And you can see the parents change, and you can see their shoulders drop, and they can see that my child is who my child is supposed to be. And I think that that's just it's great to be a little tiny piece of that.
I have a couple. One I do is I'm watching the films, usually on a large flat screen TV, as we're going through the jury process, and that's really good. And then we go through and we tweak them and make sure they look great to be on a big screen. Well, that is a very I just love it when you go into the theater, whether it's Kaufman Studios or whether it's MoMI, Museum of the Moving Image, or anywhere, and you see this, and you see the audience, and you see this massive picture up there, and you go, God darn it, that looks good. And then you know the filmmaker feels good, and then you hear from the cinematographer, and they're happy, and I love that. But one of the things that it just gets me every time is we've been doing this program with PS 69, our 5th grade inclusion class. And we do a mauve carpet that they make, and they put stars on it and their names. And then they get all these kids, they get all dressed up. Oh my God, 5th graders just dolled up. It's incredible. Their badges, they're all official filmmakers. And they come down the carpet, and 400 kids are in this auditorium watching the 5 movies that their fellow 5th graders made. And they go loony.
And the parents are like, they can't take enough pictures.
And they come down there, and I think that just makes my day. And it's just one of the most wonderful experiences you can always have, because these kids laugh. They laugh in the right places, and they go, "Oh God, oh you should," and it's something. It is incredible. Those kids, oh my God, 400 of them. It's great. That's terrific.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And what school is that? That was PS
69
Sorry,
Q.
PS 69 Queens.
Yep.
69 Queens. Okay, great. Well, fantastic. Well, again, Amanda, Jennifer, and the Katos, thank you for sharing those thoughts. I think at this time we'll move. I do think we have a question from the audience. So let's go ahead and move to this. A question from the audience. So thank you for asking. So here we go. How can we best support athletes, filmmakers, and stage performers at a time when we don't feel comfortable gathering in person? That's a good question. So I'm going to ask it one more time, and this is open to all 4 of you. How can we best support athletes, filmmakers, and stage performers at a time when we don't feel comfortable gathering in person?
Well, first of all, reach out to them, ask them how they are, because they're hurting, and ask them, talk to them, engage them, and then ask them, what are you working on? And show interest in what they're working on. And if they have a GoFundMe, or if they have something up and you can't donate to it, share it, post something, encourage them. In just almost every society, the only beings that are allowed to create are the gods. And so when us mere mortals want to make something, it's very, very hard. So encourage them.
Yeah, support at this point, almost any type of filmmaker, but if you can find any sort of VOD situation where filmmakers have their independent films, that's a great place to go. Amazon Prime has a great deal, and shop around. You never know what some incredible surprises one might get. And just the fact that an independent filmmaker has someone say, "Oh my God, I got 2 people watch my movies." What is that? I mean, that's exciting. It's not the money. In this particular case, that just that moral support that someone watched it. That's a big deal for filmmakers.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, Amanda, did you have a thought on that question?
I'll let it go.
Oh, sorry. Jennifer, do you want to go?
No, I actually don't have anything. I was going to say Amanda is better suited for this one.
Well, it's a great question, because that's something that I think all the NBA and all the sports teams have really been talking about. Is that's how they generate the revenue, and getting fans in. There's a lot of talk right now of allowing certain number of fans to come back, and still socially distance, but it is hard, and a lot of teams have been hit with that. And I know, we have season ticket members that want to be back, and so I think it's kind of navigating that still. I know the players, they're the social media, reaching out on there, showing your support, being able to just watch the games at home, weighing in, they're very active on that. And so I know that that's kind of a way to still feel connected. And another area that the Celtics have really tried to do is create virtual events. So I actually just hosted a virtual event today with season ticket members, having more of that exclusive interview with Brad or a player, to still feel like you're a part of it in the comfort of your own home. But it's definitely something that teams are trying to figure out right now, and I think it's trending up. I think it's just it's going to be a little while longer before we do see it back to what it is. I know a lot of people are apprehensive of attending games and being in that environment again. So the virtual events, still donating to the Celtics, still have their Boston Celtics Shamrock Foundation, being involved with that, are still great ways to feel a part of it.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and this is for all four of you. So many people are currently unemployed, and many students are worried about finding jobs and getting work experience after being in a remote environment this past year. What advice would you have for graduating students and alumni who are entering each of your respective industries?
That's an easy one in DC. It's the internship. Unfortunately, it's often the unpaid internship. But when I was still at U of O, once I decided I wanted to go into this, go in this direction, I did a internship at the U.S. Department of Education and at the Oregon Department of Education. So I did both, and I got jobs at both of them too. So, typically people want to test, give you a test drive, and that's a great way to do it. And if you're still in school, it's a nice way to be supported. I'm hoping that organizations will be better about paying their interns. It's really a great way to continue inequity in our country to do that, because not everyone can afford to do that. And it really depends on your background and where you are in life when you decide. But internships are great. And if anyone's interested in education, reach out to me. I will help.
Great.
So it's the same in our industry. So if you're going to be an intern, there's a couple things I would tell you to do. You know how much time you're on social media now? What if you spent one of those hours researching something you don't yet know? What if you spent a little bit of that time researching all the different places you would like to go? I was raised in a very small town. There's no way I would have ever gotten to New York except I decided I wanted to. And I decided to come here and build a life. That's the first thing. Do some research. Second of all, be the intern that can do anything. Be the intern who can do anything, because when you have the money, I'm going to hire you. Get her. She did everything. Get him. He didn't know when he came in, but he learned it by the time he left. Be the intern who can do anything.
And we've done that with our interns. They'll be here for a while. Some are college kids, and they'll get credit for that. So and
then they're paid.
And then we pay them. And we've had a couple people that come through here both in the technical aspect, and we've had some come through here on the jury aspect, and they've worked essentially as interns or to be part of it, and they've gone on now to be with much bigger festivals and being paid. And that's what it all is. You have to start small, work your way up. In the motion picture business, it's the same way. It's all about showing up. And if you're on time, you're late. And you have to stay well past its time to go. And you're always picking things up, be 2 steps ahead. Don't let anybody, just hustle. You have to hustle. And you can find your way in. It's just keeping at it all the time.
Yeah, I agree with everyone on that. The internships were crucial for me starting out. I think networking is huge. Obviously, it's different now during COVID times of trying to schedule a meeting for coffee or, trying to set up different meetings. Now, I think it's reaching out over email, trying to do a Zoom talk if you can. I've also heard so much about in this industry too, in broadcasting, creating a brand for yourself. Nowadays, we have so much at our fingertips in terms of using social media, creating a website, getting the reps of just being at home and, trying to do stuff on camera, putting yourself out there and really kind of weighing in on different topics, creating that brand. So when people do look you up or do see you have material that you can show them and they get a sense of who you are from that. So I've always said use social media for the good of really trying to create that brand of who you are and what you want to represent in the industry.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All four of you. So I've got one more question from the audience, and Jennifer, I'm going to spotlight you. This question is targeting yourself. And we're at 8:17 here on the East Coast, and then we're going to finish with one question specifically about a favorite memory from your time at the University of Oregon. So let's go ahead and start with this question from the audience. Jennifer, how much influence does the Secretary of Education have on the day-to-day work of the U.S. Department of Education? How much policy do they set that affects your work, and what has that transition been like?
Yeah. So I think that they were we just now got a new secretary. So we don't know anything about him yet. He hasn't, and we know his past, but we don't know him as the Secretary of Education yet. So I'll speak to Secretary DeVos as an example. She's in there a little bit less than 4 years because it takes a bit to get in. It's going to affect your work sooner or later. It didn't having her as secretary, they typically set priorities. They have their priorities that they're following, and whether or not, gosh, it's kind of hard to, it will intersect with your work sooner or later. But for the first couple of years, I was going along with my programs as I always had, and then I intersected my programming with choice, which was her. I don't know how much other people follow it, but choice was big, and in terms of choosing a school, right? So being able to choose a charter school, a private school, etc. And then it became a little larger, and it became about teacher choice and professional development, which is what I do. And so then that made a change in my program. And so every secretary will affect what you do. It can be writ large that they can really be behind the writing of a law, like No Child Left Behind during Bush era. And then there was the Recovery Act funds under Arnie Duncan. And so sometimes they have these big laws and you're helping to carry those out. Other times they just have that vision that is going to intersect with your work, but it will affect you. I didn't see Secretary DeVos on a day-to-day basis, but it did definitely affect what I did. And I remember a friend of mine one time asking about my work and in an administration, I won't name the administration. And she said, well, you don't need to do what they tell you to do, right? And I said, well, I do work for them. Whoever the president is, that president is my boss, and I will do what they ask me. That's our job.
Okay. Well, great question from the audience, and
Yes.
Jennifer, thanks for your response.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
now we're gonna tee up some softball questions as we close our event. And Jennifer, I think we'll go ahead and start with you. Then we'll move over to Amanda and the Catos. Your time in Eugene, your time at the University of Oregon. This is a difficult question, but what's a favorite memory? A favorite memory?
Summer. The summer always, right? So the first time I ever saw Eugene was in August, or no, I think it was in Portland first, but I ended up in Eugene. And I always tell people, if you don't want to move to Oregon, you should not go visit in August, because it's just the most beautiful place you've ever been. July, August, sometimes June, sometimes September. But my favorite memory is driving up toward Bend, that highway. I can't remember the number of it. And just the trees, the trees are all right along the road, kind of going up to heaven and the blue sky. And it's just the most gorgeous place you could ever be. And those rivers and That's my favorite memory. I was listening to music and looking at the trees around me and thinking that this is God's country.
Absolutely. All right, Jennifer, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Amanda, your time as a student there at the University of Oregon, you can only pick one, but what's a favorite memory that you have?
It's so hard. I mean, I had the best time of my life at Oregon, and just the people and what Jennifer said, it's such a beautiful place. I think one of my favorite memories was game days. So I cheered at Oregon. I was a cheerleader for 4 years, and I was captain my senior year. And I remember, just the town, everything shuts down and everybody's at Autzen Stadium. And, we're there really early in the morning getting ready. And then, we're going down the tunnel, and the duck is on the motorcycle. And it was always the tradition that the duck would, go out in front of us, and we would run as fast as we could in front of the football team, right when they did the introduction of the team. And I just remember our coach would always say, it just make sure you run as fast as you can, because the players will run you over. And I just remember the excitement and the buildup and just running out of the tunnel and seeing all those fans, and it was such an amazing experience. So I think all those game days and looking forward to those was the best time.
And of course, it never rained on you, because it never.
Yeah, it never rains in Autzen Stadium.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Preston and Kato, the difficult, but your favorite memory there at the University of Oregon. Preston, I know you spent some time in East Lansing, but when you eventually did arrive in Eugene, a favorite memory of yours? We'll start with yourself.
Well, one of my very favorite memories was when my art professor, it was finally time to shoot our film for motion graphics, which we've been working on for quite some time. And that's when the equipment has finally shown up. And the first thing he said was, whatever you do not take a motion picture camera near sand or the ocean. Well, I ended up in Eastern Oregon on the sand dunes in the middle of Oregon. I ended up shooting at the ocean dunes down there as well. And so because my film had to take place in the dunes. And I just remembered how thrilled he was when I came back, and I said, well, these cameras have been to the desert and to the ocean, and I have to do this. That's us in the middle of the Oregon dunes.
There we go.
There with that camera, smack dab and all that.
That's you. That's you, right?
Yeah,
that's your guy. Oh my God.
Okay. That's a lot of sand.
That is a lot of sand.
Camera. Yeah. Fantastic.
My favorite deal happened every Friday night, if I remember correctly, at somebody's house party, at Doug's house party or Dawn's house party or Melanie's house party or my house party, and everybody would just be dancing and having the most incredible time. And I had never experienced anything like that. And I remember one time in the middle of dancing, I just screamed out, I love all of you people. And I still do. I still do love.
Frequently.
Oh, well, now we don't need to go there. I love all the people that were there and that gave so much of their heart to my journey and allowed me to be part of theirs. The theater is a special, special place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kath and Preston, thanks so much. And before I hand it over to Josh, Jennifer and Amanda and the Cato, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you and learning about your journey and your experiences as Ducks. So Josh, I think I'll hand it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Oliver.
Great. Thank you, Oliver, for moderating, and thank you to our panelists. That was very informative. And a couple things that stood out to me is first what Kath has said, that tells people at the film festival, is that this is certainly a different medium than we're used to, but there's always a need to share our stories. And for me, I'm really glad that we've had this opportunity to bring you all together. people in different cities across the I-95 corridor to share their stories. It also stood out to me that, one thing is we all have so much in common as UO grads, but we all have different interests, and we were allowed to pursue those interests and be prepared to go out into this world because of the education we got at the University of Oregon. So it's just fun to see, given, the different backgrounds of our panelists, but really that stood out among them all. So thank you again to our attendees for coming and joining us this evening. Just a couple housekeeping things is that after this, you'll receive a survey. We ask that you please take the survey. That better helps us with future programming. So thank you again for attending. Stay safe, everyone, and go Ducks.